We begin this morning from Nigeria's National Assembly with expectations on how the lawmakers will react to President Buhari's veto of the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. At the House of Representatives, Speaker Gbajabiamila indicated that the House will revisit the bill in the new year when it resumes from recess. However, he says there is no need for a wholesome rejection of the bill.
Despite the differences of opinions, all of us in the House of Representatives and indeed the entire National Assembly worked to pass the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. We included in that bill provisions we hoped will significantly enhance the conduct of our national elections and improve public confidence in our electoral outcomes. As it is now, that bill has not received presidential assent, and it falls to Parliament to decide the best way forward. When we return in the new year, we will resume our efforts to reform the electoral system in our country, and we will do it together. That is what the Nigerian people expect of us, and we will do our duty for God and country. Whichever way it pans out, we must not throw away the baby with the bathwater, and must deliver a credible and enduring electoral system to Nigerians.
However, the position in the Senate is still unclear after Senate President Ahmed Lawan read President Buhari's letter declining to sign the Electoral Amendment Bill. The lawmakers went into a closed-door session and their decision was not made public. Arise correspondent Amaka Okoye reports.
After keeping the nation guessing, President Buhari eventually made his position known on the Electoral Act Amended Bill. The President of the Senate opened the floor by reading the letter to his colleagues.
Further to the letter dated 18th November 2021, forwarded for presidential assent, the Electoral Act Amendment Bill 2021 as passed by the National Assembly. I have received informed advice from relevant ministries, departments, and agencies of the government, and have also carefully reviewed the bill in light of the current realities prevalent in the Federal Republic of Nigeria in the circumstances. Arising from the review, Mr. Senate President may wish to note that the conduct of elections for the nomination of party candidates solely via direct primaries, as envisaged by the Electoral Amendment Bill 2021, has serious adverse legal, financial, economic, and security consequences which cannot be accommodated at the moment, considering our nation's peculiarities.
However, this decision has raised an air of disappointment from different quarters.
Since the letter has been read, it's obvious that our fears were indeed confirmed. So that's where we are. Well, it leaves us with some feeling of some measure of disappointment and some measure of uncertainty, given the number of years that we have put into this. We are waiting to be guided by the leadership of the National Assembly, and of course, if you listen to a number of programs that preceded this final outcome, it was obvious that the narrative was just to hold some consultations and all that they said. We have to find a way forward.
Among other reasons for rejecting the bill, the President cited high cost of conducting direct primaries, security challenge of monitoring the election, violation of citizens' rights, and marginalization of small political parties.
The indirect consequences of the issues of high cost and monetization are that it will raise financial crimes and constitute further strain on the economy. It will also stifle smaller parties without the enormous resources required to mobilize all party members for the primaries. This is not healthy for the sustenance of multi-party democracy in Nigeria.
But the lawmakers later went into an executive session to discuss the president's veto. According to them, it is important that they discuss the issue and decide the next line of action before embarking on Christmas break. They are due to reconvene Wednesday. Amaka Okoye, Arise News.
Meanwhile, ahead of today's plenary, at the upper chambers, 79 aggrieved senators have agreed to override President Muhammadu Buhari's refusal to assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. In an exclusive chat with Arise News off camera, a ranking senator says the lawmakers began collecting signatures right inside the Senate chamber before the end of plenary on Tuesday, after Senate President Ahmad Lawan read the letter from President Buhari explaining his reasons for rejecting the bill. The senator says the lawmakers will override President Buhari's veto, just like the previous National Assembly did in 2001 with the passage of the Niger Delta Development Commission bill during the government of former President Olusegun Obasanjo. But he says this will be done in the interest of Nigerians and not as a means of fighting President Buhari as to prevent a public backlash. Two-thirds majority is constitutionally required in both the Senate and the House of Representatives to override the president's veto for any bill to become law. That makes it 73 senators and 240 members of the House of Representatives. There is no indication yet on the mood in the House of Representatives. Well, Dr. Abatin, as you can see, there's no indication yet, but Femi Gbajabiamila had said that, do not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I don't know what you make of that. Do you see it as a reconciliatory message? Maybe they might want to adjust or amend the bill to remove probably the direct primaries.
Well, I think it's like this. The reactions from the lawmakers and other stakeholders should be expected. After it became very clear that the president had chosen to withhold his assent, it's within his prerogative to choose one way or the other. You should also expect that the National Assembly would respond. And what was done by the Senate and the House of Reps yesterday, yes, clearly within their powers under the Constitution, both Section 58, subsection 5, and Section 59, subsection 4 of the 1999 Constitution. Now, the way the reports have come out today is that, yes, yesterday, the senators, the majority of the senators, are leaning towards an override of the president's veto. But in the case of the Senate, they went into a closed session for about 37 minutes, and at the end of the day, we were told that they resolved that when they return from the Christmas break, they will be going on break today, we're told, and then in January, they will take a decision, or perhaps they will consider it at plenary today. But if we go by what Senator Ajibola Bashiru said, that's the spokesperson of the Senate, he was saying that, look, the arguments that the president, stated as reasons for refusing to sign that particular piece of legislation, he said those reasons are fallacious. And he tried to break it down to say, look, security. If we talk about security, are you going to say that elections will not be conducted because of insecurity? And that if it is funding, that in itself is not, a very strong excuse. And who says, that the mode of the direct primaries, has been cast in stone? So Femi Falana SAN has also reacted. In the House of Representatives, we're told that the mood also is to consider the president's position. But the point to be made, finally, is that, look, a piece of legislation is a living document. You can always tinker with it. The governors seem to be on the side of the president, understandably, but I don't think it's something over which anybody should lose sleep. In January, we'll see whether the National Assembly will support the people of Nigeria on some of those key issues, not just direct primaries, electronic transmission, the mode of the ballot process, and all of that.
I think we'll have to go on a short break, Tunde, before we take your comment. And when we come back, we'll continue on the news headlines. Do stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. We're still on the news headlines. Tunde Abiola, before we went on a break, we were discussing the Electoral Amendment Bill and President Buhari's veto. Your comment on it?
Which we will discuss in great detail with our guests later on in the show. But I just find it really, I don't know, there's a place in life for pragmatism. but there's also a place for courage and vision, especially when we're talking about leaders. I felt that that whole letter was just a capitulation to what the president described as present realities, which can be challenged, which can be changed. They ought to be. You can't just say that because we have security challenges, we need to continue to reach for less than our best in democracy. You can't just say because we do have an unfortunate propensity to introduce corruption into everything, especially the electoral process, we cannot legislate. The whole point of enacting laws is to establish standards and to curb certain ills. You don't just fold your arms and say, well, that's just the way it is and we can't really, take any action. What then is the point of your leadership? That really is the question. And for me, a lot of the rationale that the president gave was quite convoluted and most unconvincing. So this, for me, is a crashing disappointment. I mean, I ought to have known when he was taking 30 days to, come back with a response, which is completely unnecessary to do, and all the tenterhooks that the whole nation was being held to. But it still did come as a blow to me. And the reasoning was just so unsatisfactory. I'm sure we'll be discussing that in greater detail. But, the idea that we're going to go into the 2023 general election with the Electoral Act of 2010 should be rejected by everybody, which is why I'm so proud to hear what we have heard so far from both the House of Reps, Right Honourable Gbajabiamila, who you quoted earlier, saying that they will look into this. As you said, Dr. Abati, when the National Assembly goes on recess, it's not like they're going to come back in mid-January and forget all about this issue. No, it's clear that they will address it because they know the kind of work, the kind of collaboration, the kind of effort that they put into it. Only for the president to just flush that down the loo with a flick of his pen, it's completely unacceptable. And the National Assembly must rise to the occasion now. I mean, I have my criticisms of the National Assembly, sometimes through no fault of their own. Yes. There's certain factors that hamper them. Many decades of military rule where we did not have a National Assembly, the quick turnover that we have with our lawmakers, they're not as strong as they ought to be, but now is the time for them to rise to their full height and defend the interests of Nigeria. There is no way we can continue with the exact Electoral Act. And the president's, part of why I found his reasoning, unconvincing, the ink had barely dried on the PIA, which I sent it to in August. In September, he was back to the National Assembly asking for amendments. That could have been done in this instance, because all we're talking about is one clause, if that clause really is that objectionable. So there's really no excuse for this type of behavior. It's really disappointing.
I agree with you, too.
Well, the only consolation we have in this regard is that the situation is slightly different from the situation in 2018. When the strongest argument, the third time that the president rejected the bill in December 2018, that is, was that, look, there wasn't enough time to carry out those reforms. If this can be resolved early enough in the year 2022, then there will still be more than enough time to deal with the details, or for the executive maybe to go back to the National Assembly and for the matter to be resolved. But I think the National Assembly, the kind of feedback we're getting from members of the National Assembly is encouraging.
Yes.
Even if there are persons within that National Assembly who are saying, oh, no effort should be made to embarrass the president. This is not anybody trying to embarrass the president. It's a lawmaking process. And that lawmaking process should just go in line with the Constitution and also the expectations and preferences of the Nigerian people, who these lawmakers represent.
Well said. Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Roto Sodiri and Michael Wilson give us update on Africa and global business. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Roto Sodiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning, Rotis.
Good morning, Tunde. Welcome back. Good to see you. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Oji. Good to see you as well.
Good morning.
Good morning. We begin with in Nigeria, of course. House of Assembly has...
House of Representatives, you mean?
Yes. Excuse me, House of Representatives, the House of Assembly. They've passed an increased 2022 budget, which is at 17.1 trillion naira, which is about, 25% up from 16.3 trillion that was in the appropriation bill. And, well, look, as always, whenever we discuss the budgets here, we always talk about the metrics in the budget. Now, we've got the oil benchmark has been increased to $62 per barrel in 2022 from 57. You've got the exchange rate at 410 naira to the dollar. You've got inflation at 13%. You know, we're at, 15.47 now. We've been moderating, and it's already December. So, I don't know, 13% inflation. You've also got GDP growth of 4.2%, which, you know, we did 4% in the third quarter of this year. We might do 2.83% GDP growth for full year 2021. Will we do 4.2% in 2022? That is what they're assuming. What else? I mean, again, for the fact that with this, there's been some additions made to this budget, 25% increase, that of course means that the deficit is also going to go up. As of 2020, according to with the appropriation bill, we had a 6.3 trillion naira deficit. What does that mean? If you've got a 25% increase in your budget and your deficit goes up, you're probably going to borrow more. We talked about our full public debt stock at 38 trillion naira. That was as of the third quarter of this year. We're now in December, in the fourth quarter. That number is obviously going to go up. So, well, President Buhari, he'll probably go over it. Maybe he might make some last-minute changes. But, on the good side, we're on the January through December budget cycle. So we're organized, we're structured, we're moving forward. But again, the key thing here for Nigeria is that as this number continues to increase, it's got to be financed one way or the other. And unfortunately, our oil revenues are not enough. Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed has said we have to keep borrowing. So that should concern everyone else. But what are you going to do? Money can't come from thin air. Still in Nigeria, sugar. I had to write this down. President Buhari has inaugurated a $73 million intervention scheme. Let me read this entire thing out to you. It's the Presidential Intervention on Irrigation Infrastructure to Accelerate Sugar Backward Integration Program projects. And essentially, they're aiming for 10,000 hectares of sugar plantations in order to increase sugar cane yield. And essentially, I think they're looking at the number of states: Adamawa, Niger State, Kwara, Nasarawa. Governor Abdullahi of Nasarawa State, he happens to also be in one of those states where the sugar intervention program is taking place. And he said that Nigeria can be one of the biggest producers of sugar in the world. Unfortunately, the reality is that we're just not there yet. We've imported, as of 2019, 1.6 million metric tons of sugar, and as far as production is concerned, it's about what? It's barely a fraction of that. It's about, I think, about 63,000 or 630,000 hectares or so. So we are very, very, as far as production versus consumption, we are still very far away. They plan on working with private sector players, Dangote Sugar, BOA, and so on and so forth. We have a sugar master plan in place, but I think issues with infrastructure issues, which is why you're seeing the $73 million intervention, is what's holding us back. Smuggling is also holding us back. I mean, we're still talking about intervention. Let's quickly move to Morocco or Egypt. Egypt, this is very interesting. Egypt's National Wage Council is planning on implementing their minimum wage, I think it's about 2,400 Egyptian pounds monthly, to the private sector. So, with minimum wages, it's usually for the public sector workers and so on, but they want to apply this to the private sector to make the private sector conform to their minimum wage as of January 2022. What the National Wage Council in Egypt has said is that due to the impact of COVID-19, the Omicron, Delta, everything else, they have to step forward and try to make sure that the private sector is in line with what the government is. Now, a few folks are scratching their head. I mean, if you want to be competitive, all the government has to do is just raise its minimum wage. And that, as far as, market dynamics are concerned, that can force the private sector to do the same. Not sure if you have to implement it and force it on the private sector. So it's going to be interesting to see how private sector players react to this. But it's an interesting economic discussion as to whether or not you need to force a minimum wage on the private sector as opposed to just raising it for the public sector. Finally, very quickly, Morocco, their central bank has held the benchmark interest rate at 1.5%. Inflation, year-on-year inflation in Morocco is 2.6%. GDP growth is expected to be 6% this year. The central bank is maintaining an accommodative stance. They've closed their borders to travel due to the different variants, which has really impacted their tourism revenues. Most of their revenues are going to be coming from remittances. I think they're expecting about $10 billion this year in Morocco. So it's steady as she goes. But I would, I think any Nigerian would give their left arm to have 2.6% inflation like Morocco has. That's our update for today.
Well, okay, I think I'll start with Egypt then. I'm not a big fan of government imposing a minimum wage on the private sector, apart from perhaps to the extent that as a private sector business owner and employer of labor, you should at least maintain that public sector benchmark.
Right.
I think it's really horrendous when business owners say, oh, I can pay my staff, like in Nigerian context now, maybe 20,000 naira a month, that I'm not bound by the 30,000 naira minimum. You are actually a stingebat. That's what that's about.
Right.
But what you were saying about sugar is really interesting. I don't know when we're going to scale the heights of Brazil, the top sugar producer in the world. And we can. We're not even scratching. We haven't even made a dent in like the top 10. And to the point of this intervention and the infrastructure irrigation of 10,000 hectares, that is not an awful lot, is it? It's actually quite modest, unfortunately. We're looking at, we have, I think it's 100,000 hectares of land to be acquired for the purposes of sugar development, which is underutilized as usual. But even if we were going full steam ahead and really using all the land that we have available, it still would not be enough to reach that target of 1.7 million hectares that you referred to in that master plan, which lapses next year. And we haven't actually achieved our 10-year sugar master plan. And there's also, I was reading a report also in this day, I think today's this day, about from the executive secretary of the National Sugar Development Council. And he was talking about how a major operator in that industry could not get a letter of credit that he was trying to raise for 18 months. There's also that, lack of access to foreign exchange. So many things need to be looked at, because really for me, you'd think sugar is low-hanging fruit, apparently not.
Well, I wanted to add that I thought it was important that they were going to partner with Dangote Group and the BOA Group. I think that would really help to increase the scale as well.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
But see, they're already in the backward integration program. Those private sector, BOA, Flammers, all these other companies. But to what Tundu said, it's capital intensive. Water, the irrigation process, you need a lot of water for this to work out. And so, again,
the World Bank loan, the World Bank $700 million for the climate program.
Well, so what the World Bank has said is that Nigeria has outdated agricultural practices, not enough mechanized farming. There's also the drought issue. There's also insecurity. They mentioned that as well. So that 700 cannot be dropped entirely on sugar. That's more of a general improving agriculture. But then it would, as a follow through, it would impact that. But yeah, we hope for more assistance from the World Bank.
Okay, let's start with the budget. Budget 2022. I mean, 1.7 trillion, you said.
17.1.
17.1 trillion. The House of Representatives added, to the proposal brought by the president. Now, in October, the president had asked for an extension of the 2021 budget till March next year. And that request was granted by both the House of Reps and the National Assembly. But if you are looking for one of the major achievements of the Buhari administration, is that they've been able to be very disciplined in terms of their interface with the National Assembly to make sure that the budget cycle does not become over-prolonged and a source of unnecessary tension. So even with this extension, the law provides for six months. So even with this extension, I think we can still say that the government of the day is consistent. Now, House of Reps, they've passed it today. At plenary, the Senate is also supposed to look at it. But what we have on the table so far are those same benchmarks that you talked about. One of the benchmarks is 1.8 million barrels per day.
Oil production,
yes, in terms of output, oil production. Are we going to be able to meet that? 4.2% GDP growth. 13% inflation rate. I mean, on what is all of that based? Exchange rate 14 to the dollar. That's not the realistic thing that is in the market now. And with the uncertainty that not just Nigeria is dealing with, but the entire world, either in terms of supply chain disruptions or in terms of the politics of OPEC, and also the COVID challenge that the entire world faces. Even with Omicron, we don't know. No country knows exactly how that is going to play out. So I don't know what this confidence is based upon, but I see that, again, the same old issues. If you look at it, the current expenditure is higher than capital expenditure. Debt service is over 3.7 trillion,
correct.
Right? And then if you look at the statutory transfers, the same old argument. So we go through this cycle in terms of the quality of the budget that is offered. Perhaps that's why, there are other additional arguments that have been put forward by civil society in Nigeria that we need a complete rethinking, of the budgeting process. As for Egypt, yes, I was a bit taken aback when, you reported that the National Wages Council is trying to fix for the private sector. I thought that the whole idea of the International Labour Convention on minimum wages is that it's not restricted to the public sector. What that international standard that has been negotiated since 1919, what it spells out is that, look, there are certain minimum standards that countries, should maintain in terms of justice, in terms of equity, in terms of ensuring the dignity of labor. And that's why there is room for, collective bargaining, either you're in the public sector or you are in the private sector. And Egypt ratified that convention. So maybe we don't have enough details, I don't know, in terms of how the private sector has found itself in Egypt, where the government has to dictate the minimum wage.
Right. Interesting to see how
because it's called national minimum wage.
Right, true.
Whether
That's
you're private sector
or public. True. There's a good point there.
I know in Nigeria that's not always the case. I'm sure you've heard the stories.
Well, that's why the labor unions are always fighting for their rights.
As they should. People go through all kinds of abuses, don't they?
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning, Rotus.
Thank you.
Moving on to Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good stuff. Then Asia stocks relatively mixed this morning. Singapore suspending quarantine-free flights from tomorrow until January the 20th. That's the most important news out of there. China has, for one single COVID case, shut down the Chinese border city, Dongjing City. 200,000 people cannot now go out. Demand all its population stays at home today, avoids going out unnecessarily. Very little public transport and some school classes, and also will not clear travellers. So this is because of one COVID case. A single COVID case causes a shutdown. China has increased its vigilance, obviously, as we know, as we've been talking about, and it's now down to this zero policy. What that happens, what that occurs and how that affects China's economy, who on earth knows? US recap then, and stock futures are flat after that big rebound yesterday on the Dow. All three major averages rallied in regular trading towards the end of the day. Travel-related stocks were in relief rally mode. They're putting COVID fears aside, but that's just this one day. I still feel as though people are actually buying on the dip rather than buying things fundamental. Delta Airlines and United Airlines both rising yesterday. And just a footnote to this, we'll hear more about this, no doubt, in the new year, which is not that far away. As Chinese companies retreat, the NYSE and the Nasdaq are looking at IPO pipelines in India and Southeast Asia to make up for lost business. The strangeness of Turkey continues. The lira gained about a massive 20% yesterday, at one point yesterday. It's still down, though, 40% on the year. This is because, yes, as you know, what President Erdogan does is when the inflation is rising, he actually lowers interest rates, or tells his central bank to lower interest rates, and he says he's going to actually protect guaranteed savings. He's going to guarantee savings for people, and they actually quite like that in Turkey. Again, it's out on its own as far as that particular policy is concerned. I feel as though money markets work a bit like this. If you smell there's blood in the water, then they go for it. Now, your super yacht that you ordered, no doubt, all three or four of you, last year, I'm afraid you're going to have to wait a few more years for that. There is, in fact, a supply crunch in super yachts. Super yachts is anything over 80 feet. That's the criterion for it. And a record 1,024 super yachts are in construction, up 25% on on last year. And sought-after amenities include beach clubs, whatever that means, which provide easy access in and out of the water, and of course extra strengthened super yachts, expedition super yachts as they're called, which can travel in harsh, icy conditions. So you'll be waiting a little bit longer for your super yachts, ladies and gentlemen. European leaders are reinstating coronavirus restrictions, particularly latest one. We know about Austria. I'm telling you now about Germany and Portugal, post-Christmas curbs. It will bring, they're worried that their health systems will be brought to the brink of collapse. I'm wondering what their hospitality industries are thinking about it quite rightly right now. I'll come on to that as far as the UK is concerned. Germany announced from the 28th of December, restrict private gatherings to 10 people. Nightclubs will close. Football will be played behind closed doors. And Portugal is ordering all nightclubs and bars to close beyond the 26th of December. Here's a story that we will be coming back to in the new year. EU gas prices shoot to new highs, hugely up, 20% yesterday to 450 pence a therm. That's how much it costs in the UK. I don't know how it is with you. European gas prices up 800% since the beginning of 2021. A lot of that down to Russia. The UK and Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, said no further restrictions in England before Christmas. This is dates and not data. This is what they're doing now. They want us to have a nice Christmas, and they think that we'll forget. I don't think we will. I think most voters will be worried about the new year, quite honestly. But the hospitality sector has got a £1 billion package from the Chancellor. Not enough, of course. It doesn't come anywhere near reaching some of... There's one particular restaurant in London, which I know quite well. And if you come over to London, I'll take you to it with a great deal of pleasure. Their cancellations last week were 10,000 guests cancelling. 10,000 guests cancelling because of this Omicron, of which we know still very little. The health secretary is saying that he doesn't want a pingdemic anymore. So Sajid Javid is saying self-isolation will be cut from 10 days to 7. In other words, if you prove positive on a lateral flow test, then you only need to stay home for 7 days. The change comes amid this huge spike in cases, but still we don't know what it's about yet. Oil, another wild ride for it yesterday. You talked a little bit about oil earlier in the programme. I would have thought that Nigeria's targets are quite safe, actually, because at the present, I'm looking at Brent crude about $74 a barrel, WTI $73.25 a barrel. And gold, well, poor old gold, sleepless at the moment, nobody quite sure which way it's going. So golden slumbers, I think, in Singapore as we speak right now. And it's not expected to move much before the holidays start. That's the global view.
Well, Michael, I wanted to talk about China and their quasi-measure of, locking down that one city because of the COVID case. And I know you have said that you don't know how it will affect the economy, but I believe they've also shut down transportation to and into that city as well, not just locking down the facilities. But I wanted to ask you, isn't it something that we can learn from China with this whole COVID-19 lockdown that they have imposed in their country? One case, we don't know if it's Omicron at this point.
It seems odd to me that you close a city of 200,000 down because you have one case. That's like stopping people driving because you have one road accident, isn't it? I mean, I don't really see, and I don't. So that's number one. I don't get it at all. And number two, as far as the economy is concerned in China, who knows? I mean, its central bank can print as much money as it likes. We have to learn about China from scraps of information that we're given. Their state television service says one thing. We get little energy bits here and there. We know roughly what their imports are because those figures can be added up from outside. But as far as a lesson is concerned, would you close down a whole economy because of one COVID case? I certainly wouldn't. I mean, I think that's pushing public health issues to a ludicrous degree. But that's my point. I mean, it's what politicians do. But China is not normal. China is a communist country, remember, and they are able to do this because it's a command economy.
Well, very quickly, two things. Let me start with Turkey. President Erdogan says, well, what he's doing is the best. And we've been talking about the kind of unorthodox economics that is governing the situation there. But on Monday, the lira went up 25%. On Tuesday, yesterday, it appreciated in terms of value by about 15%. And the authorities in Turkey, they are celebrating that they've been able to come up with this financial alternative, they call it, which is whereby the government, tries to bridge the difference between the value of savings in lira and the equivalent dollar deposits. Do you think that this makes sense in the, or do you think that Erdogan has been able to address the concerns of those who think that the dubious economics in that country is unusual? Now, as for the United Kingdom, the Chancellor is saying in response to the mixed attitude of businesses in the UK to his proposed £1 billion intervention, that, he will respond appropriately, to the challenges we face. What would be the most appropriate response? Because the British Chambers of Commerce, they are asking that, look, there should be a sector-specific follow scheme. But it looks like the Chancellor is not thinking in that direction. And what do you think of this manner in which the Prime Minister has managed to save Christmas? How does it come across to you? Because in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland, the protocols are quite different.
First of all, as far as Turkey is concerned, I don't know. I see what Erdogan's trying to do. What he's saying is that because it will make imports, it will make their exports cheaper, but it will still make their imports more expensive, which includes a vast amount of tourism as well. Again, protecting savings is one thing. I think he's telling the populace what they want to hear. I just don't get it. I've said this previously on the programme. It belies every possible monetarist bone in most economists' bodies, quite honestly. What on earth is going on in China, in Turkey rather? I feel as though the rise, that's one thing, but I feel as though the volumes are probably quite small. And I think I used the phrase whipsaw earlier on. I think that's basically what it is. I think it could be down. It could be down as we speak. I don't know what the rate is right now. It could be down tomorrow. It could be down after Christmas and into the new year. I really don't know. But as far as most countries are concerned, and I think that unless you're North Korea or China, I think you probably agree that the way forward is, whether you like it or not, is to deal with inflation by higher interest rates. I mean, that's what I was taught, and I think that's what most central bankers feel as well. What is happening in Turkey, I feel there might be short-term gains, but I think, like most people I read, they fear for the long-term future of the country. Not to say it doesn't have it's got a great manufacturing base. That may be the way forward. I don't know, but we'll watch with interest as far as next year is concerned. And your other point about Rishi Sunak and the amount of money that is given to hospitality, let me put it in context for you. You may not think we're a very hospitable nation, unlike most parts of Africa. Let me put you right on that. 1 in 10 people working actually works in what's loosely described as the hospitality sector. He's given £1 billion to a sector that's worth nearly £60 billion to the economy every year. It's a very, very important part of the economy. The 6,000 per premise is about equal to one night's takings in a busy pub. As the Americans say, go figure.
Well,
thank you very much, Michael Wilson.
Thank you, Michael. We'll see you tomorrow.